Bernie Sanders is a sexist, or so we were led to believe during the most recent Democratic debate. We'll examine that claim in this video, and in addition, we'll debunk some anti-Medicare-For-All talking points, look at some of the horribly framed debate questions, laugh at Pete Buttigieg's consistently evasive answers, and talk about the problematic authorization for use of military force. Let's jump right into it. The day before this debate, a stunning revelation was made to the world. During a private conversation in 2018, Bernie Sanders told Elizabeth Warren that a woman could not win the presidency. I'm told he then slapped her ass and said, "Get daddy a beer, would ya?" I think the timing of this should really raise some eyebrows. This conversation took place in 2018, yet we only hear about it 2 weeks before the Iowa caucus. Seems like a pretty calculated attempt to drop his poll numbers to me. Here was Bernie's response during the debate.
Let's now turn to an issue that's come up in the last 48 hours. Senator Sanders. CNN reported yesterday that, and Senator Warren confirmed in a statement, that in 2018, you told her that you did not believe that a woman could win the election. Why did you say that?
Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't say it. And I don't want to waste a whole lot of time on this, because this is what Donald Trump and maybe some of the media want. Anybody knows me, knows that it's incomprehensible that I would think that a woman could not be president of the United States. Go to YouTube today. There's a video of me 30 years ago talking about how a woman could become president of the United States. In 2015, I deferred, in fact, to Senator Warren. There was a movement to draft Senator Warren to run for president. And you know what? I stayed back. Senator Warren decided not to run, and I did run afterwards. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes. How could anybody in a million years not believe that a woman could become president of the United States? And let me be very clear. If any of the women on this stage or any of the men on this stage win the nomination, I hope that's not the case. I hope it's me. But if they do, I will do everything in my power to make sure that they are elected in order to defeat the most dangerous president in the history of our country.
I thought that was a really strong answer, but you can never win 100% when you're responding to a smear like this. The fact that you're even forced to respond to it makes you look bad. No, let me explain why I'm not a filthy sexist. The parody news account MSDNC posted a tweet that said, quote, "Breaking, Elizabeth Warren changes campaign slogan to big structural smears and bid to relaunch her failing campaign," ends quote. Well, if the trending on Twitter of refund Warren was any indication, it looks like it backfired. David Pakman made a good point about this, quote, "If it's Bernie's opinion that because of sexism a woman couldn't win in 2020, that's not sexist. He could simply be wrong," ends quote. Even assuming that Bernie did say this, pointing out that there is a lot of sexism in this country that makes it harder for women to get elected isn't an endorsement of that sexism, it's a criticism of it. I also think the media must be having some kind of collective mass amnesia. They're clearly forgetting the fact that Bernie traveled all over the country trying to get Hillary Clinton elected as president. That doesn't sound to me like the behavior of a sexist pig who doesn't think a woman can win. If that was his belief, wouldn't he have just stayed home instead of doing all those rallies for her? Why are all of these overpaid media pundits smearing Bernie right now not forced to explain this obvious discrepancy for us? Is there anything in Bernie's voting history or political platform that hints at him being a sexist? You know, it's strange. I was on his campaign website reading the section Fight for Women's Rights, and I didn't see a single thing on there about the need for women to stay in the kitchen. Clearly that's some kind of mistake. Please, you can hardly get this guy to shut up about equal pay and abortion rights and contraception. He was at a feminist rally, and even they were like, "Okay, we get it, Bernie." Even his policies that don't directly target women's rights still help women out immensely in this country. How about his support for paid family leave? Or what about something more basic like raising the minimum wage or implementing single-payer healthcare? Should we vote based upon some he said, she said bullshit, or should we vote based upon what they'll actually do for the country? Let me explain to you how non-sexist Bernie Sanders is. He's such a non-sexist that he watches nothing but women's basketball. He's so non-sexist that when he goes to the strip club, he gives them a lap dance. He's such a non-sexist that he started wearing a bra just so he could take it off and burn it. Every Democratic debate thus far has featured terrible questions from the moderators. Probably the worst example I saw in this debate was when Wolf Blitzer frames pulling our troops out of the Middle East as agreeing with or perhaps even capitulating to the Ayatollah Khamenei's demands.
Senator Sanders, in the wake of the Iran crisis, Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei has again called for all U.S. troops to be pulled out of the Middle East, something you've called for as well.
Senator Sanders, turning to you now, reports say that you like puppies. Are you aware that Hitler also liked puppies? Come on, this is just silly right here. Just because a bad person agrees with the statements doesn't automatically make that statement wrong. This is a pretty gross and transparent attempt at guilt by association. And it's not an accident that he asked this question. Questions like this are exactly why Wolf Blitzer is on CNN. And the defense contractors that advertise on his network are probably jumping with joy right now. Sometimes the relationship between media and military is even more direct than advertising money. Chomsky and Herman explain in Manufacturing Consent, quote, "The large media companies have also diversified beyond the media field, and non-media companies have established a strong presence in the mass media. The most important cases of the latter are GE, owning RCA, which owns the NBC network, and Westinghouse, which owns major television broadcasting stations, a cable network, and a radio station network. GE and Westinghouse are both huge, diversified multinational companies, heavily involved in the controversial areas of weapons production and nuclear power," ends quotes. I'm reminded of that famous exchange when Rand Paul said that we should stop selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, and Wolf Blitzer responded by saying, "But Senator, wouldn't that kill jobs in the defense industry?"
Is there more chaos or less chaos with Saudi Arabia bombing into Yemen? So yeah, it's a debate we ought to have, and no president should unilaterally have this authority without the approval of Congress.
So for you, this is a moral issue because you know there's a lot of jobs at stake. Certainly, if a lot of these defense contractors stop selling warplanes, other sophisticated equipment to Saudi Arabia, there's going to be a significant loss of jobs and revenue here in the United States. That's secondary from your standpoint.
Sure, people not dying is important and all, but what about the poor defense contractors? Who's gonna stand up for them? I don't know, they're fucking 600 lobbyists maybe? By the way, I've always hated the term defense contractors because implied in that term is the idea that their weapons are used only defensively. Going overseas to invade country after country and topple regime after regime is not national defense, it's national aggression. Wolf, however, does redeem himself later in the debate by asking a pretty solid follow-up question, probably a first in his career.
But Vice President Biden, you criticized President Trump's decision to kill the Iranian General Soleimani without first going to Congress. Are there any circumstances other than a direct attack on the United States where you would take military action without congressional approval?
Only way to take a nation to war is with the informed consent of the American people. The informed consent of the American people.
Mr. Vice President, just to be clear, the Obama-Biden administration did not ask Congress for permission multiple times when it took military action. So would the Biden doctrine be different?
No, there was the authorization for the use of military force that was passed by the United States Congress, House and Senate, and signed by the President. That was the authority. It does not give authority to go into Iran. It gave authority to deal with these other issues.
Look, the AUMF is probably the single worst foreign policy tool in recent history. It's basically a blank check that allows the president to use the military unilaterally against anybody, anywhere, so long as we slap the label terrorist on them. As Representative Barbara Lee writes for The Nation, quote, "The 2001 AUMF has become a catch-all to justify dozens of military operations. From drone strikes in Yemen and Libya, to indefinite detentions in Guantanamo Bay, and warrantless wiretapping here at home, presidents from both parties have abused this authorization to drag us deeper into wars around the world. According to a 2018 report from the Congressional Research Service, the 2001 AUMF has been used at least 41 times for military action in 18 different countries, and those are only the unclassified instances," end quote. Pete Buttigieg had a brief moment in the sun where he explained what's wrong with the AUMF. There were other times, however, where he just gave complete non-answers to the questions.
We're going to continue talking about who's best prepared to be Commander-in-Chief, Mayor Buttigieg.
Well, I bring a different perspective. There are enlisted people that I served with barely old enough to remember those votes on the authorization after 9/11, on the war in Iraq. And there are people now old enough to enlist who were not alive for some of those debates. The next president is going to be confronted with national security challenges different in scope and in kind from anything we've seen before. Not just conventional military challenges, not just stateless terrorism, but cybersecurity challenges, climate security challenges, foreign interference in our elections. It's going to take a view to the future as well as the readiness to learn from the lessons of the past. And for me, those lessons of the past are personal.
So basically, his actual direct answer to the question of why he's best prepared to be commander-in-chief is him hinting at the fact that he used to be in the military. 59 seconds of fluff in 1 second of substance. Pete's like, I am so personally affected by this question that I can't even bring myself to answer it. I don't know who all of his campaign strategists are that keep telling him it's a great idea to give a bunch of non-answers like this. They're like, yeah, just keep stalling, Pete. But I don't think it'll win you any votes among anyone who's actually paying attention. Here's another evasive non-answer of his from the debate.
Leave combat troops, at least some combat troops in the Middle East, or bring them home. Mayor Buttigieg, you served in Afghanistan. Who's right?
We can continue to remain engaged without having an endless commitment of ground troops. But what's going on right now is the president's actually sending more. The very president who said he was going to end endless war, who pretended to have been against the war in Iraq all along, though we know that's not true, now has more troops going to the Middle East. And whenever I see that happen, I think about the day we shipped out and the time that was set aside for saying goodbye to family members. I remember walking with a friend of mine, another lieutenant I trained with, as we walked away, and his 1.5-year-old boy was toddling after him, not understanding why his father wasn't turning back to scoop him up. And it took all the strength he had not to turn around and look at his boy one more time. That is happening by the thousands right now as we see so many more troops sent into harm's way. And my perspective is to ensure that that will never happen when there is an alternative as commander-in-chief.
We can continue to remain engaged without having an endless commitment of ground troops. Could he be any more of a tap dancer? Continue to remain engaged how? What exactly would and would that not constitute? Pete has this really slimy habit of giving these super brief answers to the actual questions, where he tries to have it both ways and satisfy all voters, then he quickly moves on to something else before we notice that he didn't really answer the question. Probably my favorite moment of the debate was when the moderators asked, how are we expected to pay for all of these military expenditures? I'm joking, they never asked that fucking question. When it comes to Medicare-For-All, however, suddenly the cost becomes their preeminent concern.
Let's turn to healthcare, the top issue for Iowa Democrats. Donald Trump is trying to repeal Obamacare, including the protections for pre-existing conditions. We all know that each of you vigorously opposes that. Still, there are some questions about what each of you would do. Senator Sanders, you've consistently refused to say exactly how much your Medicare-For-All plan is going to cost. Don't voters deserve to see the price tag before you send them a bill that could cost tens of trillions of dollars?
Tens of trillions of dollars.
And exactly as expected, Klobuchar, Biden, and Buttigieg made the same shit talking points they always make about Medicare-For-All. What about the cost? Isn't the public option so much better? And so forth. Look, I've already made several videos debunking these anti-Medicare-For-All talking points in really fine detail, and I'd strongly recommend you check out my politics playlist to watch these, but I'm just going to briefly cover the key points here. If you average the findings of 5 studies on the subject, you find that Medicare-For-All saves $3.3 trillion over 10 years. Look closely at the assumptions made in these studies regarding drug prices, administrative costs, and reimbursement rates, and you find that they actually underestimate the savings we'd see. Rather than the cost of Medicare-For-All being in addition to what we currently spend, like many imply, it would actually be a more affordable substitute. Healthcare would be funded via tax dollars instead of the premiums, co-pays, and deductibles that are paid to profit-seeking health insurance companies whose entire business model is to deny you coverage as much as they can at the highest possible cost. Medicare-For-All would reverse these backwards incentives by providing as much healthcare as possible at the lowest achievable cost. Not only would per capita healthcare spending drop, but the burden on poor and middle-class Americans would be lessened even further through progressive taxation. A public option, on the other hand, would do almost nothing to change the private insurance status quo. All it would do is provide insurance companies with a dumping ground for sicker, unhealthier people who they pass on to the public plan using a number number of different tricks that they've already been shown to use. And despite all the talk about the public option preserving choice, single-payer healthcare would actually expand our choice where it matters, in terms of doctors, specialists, and facilities, because every one of these, by definition, would see patients in the government plan. That's the super condensed version of my response. Trust me when I say there's a lot more wrong with these arguments, and I barely scratched the surface here. Watch my full videos on the subjects. I promise they're the most comprehensive refutations of these talking points on YouTube. This debate became pure comedy for me when we saw the healthcare version of that Wolf Blitzer Rand Paul question.
Senator Sanders, coming to you now. CNN reached out to Iowa Democratic voters for their most pressing questions. Edward from here in Des Moines writes, Des Moines is an insurance town. What happens to all the insurance industry, the health insurance industry here if there is Medicare-For-All? What happens to all the jobs and the livelihoods of the people that live in insurance towns like Des Moines?
If Wolf Blitzer was the one that asked that question, I would have fucking died. He was probably nodding along while she asked it, like, that's a really good point. It's just such a weird inversion of priorities. By one estimate, 45,000 Americans die each year from a lack of health coverage under our current system. Hang on a sec, maybe we should uphold this current system to preserve some jobs. Really? Even if the business model itself is fundamentally immoral? Again, insurance companies pop open champagne bottles every time they find a new way to deny you coverage or raise your prices. When we're dealing with something that's literally as life and death as healthcare, this incentive structure is unacceptable. This isn't just some minor inconvenience like a surprise charge on your phone bill or something. People die because of this every single day in this country. Also, understand this, preserving the jobs in a certain industry is functionally synonymous with preserving the profits in that industry. Even if reporters think they're just looking out for the little guy when they make points like this, they're really just doing the bidding of these health insurance companies, either wittingly or unwittingly. With that said, it's not like these job losses are completely irrelevant, and Bernie had a solid answer to this question.
We build into our Medicare-For-All program a transition fund of many, many billions of dollars that will provide for up to 5 years income and health care and job training for those people.
Those were the moments that stuck out to me in this debate, and let's recap the key points made here. Smearing Bernie Sanders as sexist is silly when you consider his strenuous efforts to get Hillary Clinton elected, as well as his voting record and his political platform. The debate moderators, as usual, were terrible, framing less militarism as agreeing with Ayatollah Khomeini, and pretending to care about the cost of Medicare-For-All while ignoring the fact that it would save us money. Slimy Pete Buttigieg seems unable to give any direct answers, and Joe Biden's talk of showing military restraint doesn't match up with the actions taken under Obama, where the AUMF was exploited to wage all kinds of wars in many different countries. If there's one question they should have asked the candidates, it's why are you not supporting a skeptical human on Patreon? If you're new to the channel and found this video valuable, check out my full politics playlist where I debunk all kinds of arguments made by Republicans or centrist Democrats on subjects ranging from healthcare to taxes to gun control. If you want to support my work financially, becoming a patron gives you access to bonus videos and also makes you eligible to win my monthly nonfiction book raffle. If you'd like to see more debunkings like this in the future, click the bell or subscribe. And finally, let me know in the comments what you disagreed with or what you'd like me to address in my next video. Thank you all for watching and listening, as always, and until next time, take care.